Hola, bienvenido to the Green Cards to Greenbacks podcast. Hosted by me, Nestor Vargas. I'm here to teach you everything you need to know about using your dinero to create wealth and find money independence. As a kid from Colombia who grew up in a barrio, I got fed up with having money insecurities, so I decided to become a personal finance expert and a certified financial planner. After 12 years of mastering my money skills, I'm ready to share with you how I help million-dollar clients grow their wealth. If you're looking to become a master at managing your dinero, you're in the right place. Now, let's dive into the episode. Alrighty, Jen, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Green Cards to Greenbacks podcast. Today we have La Reina. Her name is Jen Hemphill. Let me go ahead and introduce her. So Jen Hemphill is a military spouse and proud bilingual Latina. She helps the busy career-oriented woman become the reinas of their money and really to love their dinero more. She's a Latino money expert, an accredited financial counselor, an author, a speaker, and host of the Her Dinero Matters podcast, which I love. I definitely recommend you guys go listen to it. Her Dinero Matters podcast is an award-winning podcast focused on the advancement of U.S. Latinas, to minimize the gender wage gap, which is crazy. We know all about it, while creating a healthy and confident conversation around money. So I love everything you do, Jen. Obviously, I've been following you for a while, and I'm just so excited to have you here. So I wanted to say hello.
Gracias, Nestor. It's so awesome just to be here be here with another Colombiano. So thank you so much for inviting me and having me. I'm excited about the conversation today.
Yes, another Colombiano, and just kind of to add some color to our episode today. I just found out that Colombia did not make it to the World Cup, and I was devastated.
Haven't been following.
It's tough, but anyhow, we'll get back to what we're going to talk about today here. So Jen she's an expert with everything regarding personal finance, money management. Her forte is one of the fortes is budgeting, correct?
Yes. I love budgeting.
Awesome.
A lot of people don't, but I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you love budgeting. Not many people do. I think the word itself is kind of like, has got this nasty connotation in their mind. It's like budget, it's restrictive. It's got like this just really bad juju around it. As a financial advisor, I don't really get into budgeting much with my clients. We just do it in a different way. But personally, my wife and I definitely have budgeted and continue to budget. We have gone through phases where we do really well with our budget, phases where we don't do really well with our budget. And so I'm so really excited to hear from you and hear some tips. But before we really get into the technical stuff of budgeting, I'm hoping that maybe we can take a step back because this is a show for Latinos and Latinas, right? And so we have this cultural barrier, or maybe call it trauma, as Latinos growing with money. And I'm hoping that maybe, Jen, you can talk to us a little bit more about kind of what are some of the most popular Latino traumas or cultural barriers that you see that keep Latinos from actually being able to budget.
I think the foremost thing is that we don't acknowledge trauma because we have this in our spiritual faith and in our culture. It's tenemos que agradecernos, so we have to be grateful for what we have. So that puts a layer of this trauma or this experience that I have, someone else had it worse than me, right? So it's not recognized as trauma yet, because here's the thing with trauma. Trauma, what is traumatic for me, Nestor, may not be traumatic for you. So trauma really comes into our lives in different forms, and how it impacts us is different. And so in our Latino community, we may not recognize it as trauma because, again, of that mentality. Someone else has it worse than us. We have to be grateful for what we have and just call it a day. So that's first and foremost. And that impacts us. That impacts us in how we manage money, because we're not really getting to the core of the issue. That trauma will impact how we manage money, how we perceive money, right? And so that's, I think, what as a Latino community, what we deal with. It's not specific forms of trauma. Some people don't recognize it. I think those Latinos that are in the US, that have been here in the US, especially I would say millennials, maybe Gen Zs, they're more open, right? They're more apt to see that trauma. I've been seeing those conversations take place, right? But those that recently maybe immigrated to the States, they're not there yet because, again, of that mentality.
And so I just had someone on the podcast and he talked about it. He called it el aguante, right? Like we're going through it and we just got to be grateful for for what we have and that we're in this country now and we're just going to continue to battle. Is that what you're saying? It's kind of similar?
Very similar. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I like that term, el aguante.
Yeah.
Tenemos que aguantarnos.
Yeah. But that's how we grew up, right? I mean, in a third world country, there's a lot of things that we have to really face. And that's just a mentality that sometimes is really good because it allows us to be go-getters and allows us to get through a lot of things, but also it does impact money.
And one more thing, if I may add, is the other layer as you immigrate and you think about your family back home or your friends back home, then there's that layer of, well, I'm here. I have it better. I shouldn't complain, right? So there's that layer too.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't even think about that. Jen, so as we think about kind of the not the Gen Y or Gen Z, but maybe kind of a little older, Gen Xers as well. There you go. We got some people here that are, and I know a lot of listeners are of that age as well. And I don't think this is just in the Latino community, but it's everywhere. How do we talk to our couple, our spouse about money? What are some tips, tricks? How do we start the conversation? Maybe because I know we could probably talk about how to talk to your spouse about money for the whole episode, but how do we start the conversation?
For me, I think and I'm not a couples counselor or whatnot, I'm a financial counselor. But really for me, the first step in talking to your spouse about money is not about the bills. It's not about the debt that you owe, but really getting to know them and their money history and their money story. And what do I mean by that? Really getting to know how they grew up around money, any experiences, any lessons they had, because then you're going to have a better appreciation for your spouse, and really understand why they are this spender or why they're this hoarder of money, why they're really frugal. There's something in their past story that has shaped them the way they are. And if you understand that story, you have a better appreciation for them. And that makes it easier when you have money conversations, because instead of maybe you're feeling a little, you're not liking what they're doing, let's say, right? Then you're going to set that aside because you understand where that's coming. So it's really about understanding them, starting to understand them. And also other tips are really maybe just having very casual conversations in terms of maybe you read a book or you listened to a podcast or you found a blog post with these really fabulous tips and say, hey, why don't we try this? I think this would be great. I heard XYZ. Those are really more casual conversations, and it leads for both to create that habit of talking money where it doesn't lead to this argument or doesn't lead to tension, because again, these are more casual. And at the same time, it creates confidence when you're talking money, because when we're talking money, a lot of people don't have that confidence. Maybe they feel guilt, they feel some shame, whatever it is around their situation. So they're not wanting to talk about money.
Oh,
so that's where I would start with.
I love those tips. Those are great. Is that something that we can find in your book?
Yes. In the book, I talk about not specifically for couples, but more about talking money. And so, yes, you can definitely find those tips there.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put a link to your book at the end of this. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but also in the show notes. Awesome. So great. Those are great tips about how to talk to your spouse or your partner about money. I personally, my wife and I, like I said at the beginning of the show, we've failed, and we are actually now to a place where we feel like we've got a pretty good handle on things, but we have failed before, and that can be really difficult for people. So what tips do you have, on how people can re-engage on this journey? A lot of people say, yeah, people know that they need to have a budget. But for some odd reason, they don't have it, or if they failed, how do we re-engage?
Re-engaging is really looking at your accomplishments, because if you're feeling bad about your finances, if you're feeling bad about progress or lack thereof with, let's say, paying off debt, you really need to re-engage yourself in terms of, what have I done well? What are my strengths? And that is about building confidence. So re-engaging and saying, okay, so maybe the budgeting hasn't worked, but this is what we have learned. And this is what we have done right. This is what we have done well. This is what we're most proud of. So it's really looking at, I call them the money wins. This is what I'm really strong at. This is my strong suit. And really, like, really listing them down. It's not just about, yes, it's great to have the conversation, but if you have that written down, it's something you can refer to later when you're maybe not having a great day, maybe the budget failed again or whatever, whatnot. Look at that list of strengths, of wins that you've had. All those things matter, because it's, a lot of people tend to think I'm really bad with money. And I hear that time and time again, but they don't acknowledge their strengths. They don't acknowledge what they have done really well with money. And that is something we really don't do a lot of. And that's what we need to do more of, to really re-engage with the budget, re-engage with any money goals that we're working.
Amen. I mean, I feel like that's so true for anything in life, is really reflecting on your past and finding the positive of it, or even reframing the past in a way that is positive and that helps you actually move forward and have that energy and confidence in being able to succeed. So let's say that I now have gone through that step of talking to my spouse, saying, hey, listen, I think we'd love to be able to get back on track with this budget. Here are some ideas that I saw from this blogger, or from Jen, or from whoever it is. We also have taken a step to just acknowledge some wins and actually get back to now being ready to figure out, being ready to budget. What resources, what tools do we have at our disposal, Jen?
Well, before we have the tools, you really need to look at, when you budgeted before, what worked and what didn't. Because we tend to think, well, there's a spreadsheet, we need to use spreadsheets. But maybe you're just not a spreadsheet type of person, and that's completely okay. And so really look at the tool that you use. And if it didn't work, why? Maybe just didn't work with your lifestyle. Maybe I'm more of a spreadsheet person, right? But maybe an app is better. There's different apps out there. Unfortunately, they come and go sometimes. They appear and they disappear on us. But there are apps up there. You can also just keep it simple with a sheet of paper, with a notebook. So what works for you, right? So you really need to understand, because it's about consistency. So if you're using a tool and you're noticing you're not being consistent, we've got a problem. We got to take a step back and see, is it the tool, or maybe something else? If it's the tool, we got to look to see what other tool we should use where we can be consistent on. And to get to your question, please remind me of the question, because I diverted.
I love
I
it.
usually do.
You're going for it. You're going for it. Tools, like, do you have any particular tools, strategies to do that?
Tools, there's definitely a lot of free spreadsheets online that you can find. Right now, I've become a fan of this app called Simplify.
Okay.
Ends with an I. And I've really liked it. It's very similar with Mint. Simplify is a paid app. It's very similar with Mint, but what I really like about it, and again, this is just me, I have no affiliation with them whatsoever, is that you can track certain areas of spending. So, for example, my husband's hobby is bicycling. And so we can track, because I'm clueless right now in terms of what to allot for cycling, and because it's the travel, it's paying for the entry for the event, and then there's gear. Oh my gosh. there's all sorts of things. And so so there's different things that you can track. You can track travel. You can track eating out, which is an area that we tend all, me included, I tend to overspend on. So you can track. And I'm really a big fan of that because it tells you, okay, this is what you set your goal for and you are nearing it, you're over it, whatever it is. So I really like that. But there's Mint that's free. I know there's that Dave Ramsey app that was, I don't even remember the name, that was really, really popular. There's a lot of apps. But really what is important with budgeting, and maybe you're going to ask this later, but you have to get clear, really crystal clear on your money. And what I mean by that is that with budgeting, okay, we put down all the bills. This is every month we pay this and this and that. But we may haircuts. I don't know. Maybe you get haircut on a weekly basis. I'm not sure, but males tend to get haircuts more often, right? But if it's an expense, because there's three different types of expenses. There's the fixed expenses. So those are maybe your cell phone bill, if it doesn't change from month to month, your rent or your mortgage. There's occasional expenses. So that would be the travel. That may be the haircuts. May not be, depend on your household. That can be gifts. Or it may not be the gifts if you have birthdays and every single month of the year. It can be also clothing, right? So you have the fixed, the occasional, and the variable expenses are your groceries, gas for the car, utilities that go up and down, those type of things. And this is where you need to understand those expenses, because where people go wrong or what I've seen where people go wrong is they list a bill, all the fixed expenses, they're easy to take care of because they come month after month and they're fixed. You know what to expect. The variable, it shifts up and down, right? But the occasional is what we don't plan for because we may put it in our budget, but putting a number in our budget is one thing. We have to execute that action because the budget is your plan and you have to execute that plan. And we execute the plan in paying the bills, no problem. But we don't execute the plan and what are we going to do with those occasional expenses? So we're nearing Christmas time at the time of this recording. So people tend to put this on their credit cards. But if they really had planned throughout the year and set some money aside. So what I mean by execute is if you have an idea, if you look through your statements or even just start with the best guess in terms of what you spend in gifts and you divide that by 12 and you see how that fits into your budget, right? And you set that money aside in a different account, whatever works for you. Then when it comes to buy those gifts, you have money set aside. Because if you have a fixed income and maybe the fixed income covers your fixed expenses and your variable expenses, and then one month comes and you have your fixed expenses, your normal variable expenses, and then some occasional expenses came in. What are you going to do if that went over your income? So that's why you need to plan. That's where a credit card debt can come into play. So if you're clear on those numbers and you have a plan on what to do, especially with those occasional expenses, and you execute that plan, meaning setting that money aside, then your life is going to be a lot easier. Believe me.
That is absolutely true, especially coming the holiday season. I can tell you from experience, when my wife loves to be a giver and she just starts spending, right? And so we have gone year over year and trying to set a particular maximum amount that we're going to spend on an annual basis to be able to execute on that plan throughout the year. We have found that the envelope method works really, really well for us. You know, obviously the way I budget is much different than other people. I'm a financial advisor. This is what I do all day in, day out. But budgeting for me is more for my wife and I to stay in sync, in harmony financially, and to not have any bickering. So we have this little envelopes. We have our fund money. Each of us have our fund money. Each of us have our personal care fund. So nails and stuff like that, haircuts. I get a haircut every 2 weeks. Got to keep it fresh. We have our gas. And then we also, for our kiddos, we have a little fund for them on a monthly basis because it's so easy to spend money on your kids, right? And we have a clothing budget. She likes to shop for clothing. So we I had to create one for her. I also have one for myself. So what I did is I identified areas where we were having obstacles and difficulties and actually staying true to it. And that's really what we track very closely now. But this is after, I mean, we've been together for 15 years. So this has been an iteration of many, many different forms. But
Yeah, it sometimes it takes time. It takes time because then life changes and you have to again readjust and make sure that the budget matches your current life. And yeah, it does definitely take time. But the more you do it, the more you stick to it, then you get into the flow. And then when life strikes and maybe there's a loss of income, or maybe there's an additional income, or there's an additional expense, whatever that may be, you know what to do.
exactly. So Jen, what about accountability? How important is accountability in this process?
I think it's very important because we're humans. We're humans. And I know you, I'm sure you're like me. I mean, we are in the financial space. You've already said you go over your budget. I have said I have too, right? We are just humans. So accountability is really important. That could be with your spouse. That could be, I mean, accountability comes in all forms. It comes free and it comes paid, right? So accountability can be with your spouse, maybe some friends. It could be you pay a coach, a financial advisor, a financial counselor, a professional, right? So that is another form of accountability. But I think it's really important because, again, we're humans. No matter what, I mean, think of doctors too. I mean, the doctors are in the health and they're not always healthy, right? They need accountability. So I think definitely, and there's different ways. You don't have to do it alone. I don't advise you to do it alone because it can get lonely trying to do it alone. And it's better and really tapping into friends or that really, and when I say tap into friends, friends that are committed, right? You have to find friends that have that same mindset as you do in terms of your finances and what you want to do. So you really want to make sure it's those friends, those family members that you tap into.
Thank you for that, Jen. I have been really using extreme accountability this year with a group of other financial advisors, and I have seen my business grow exponentially. I have seen my ability to reach out to my Latino community grow. This podcast came from having extreme accountability. So I love the accountability piece. I have seen it be extremely powerful for me, but I love the accountability piece of having a professional, someone that is there that it has the experience. Jen, and you have something like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I have a membership. So I don't do financial coaching one-on-one. I mean, I take one every once in a while clients, but I decided just to have a membership. It's called the Financially Strong Circle. And that's what exactly we provide. We provide accountability and what we also do is we make sure that everybody comes in a different stage of their finances. They might be just beginning. They may be in the middle of things. And so we provide resources and tools that really meets them where they're at because everybody's just in a different stage with their finances. So we definitely provide accountability and there with the membership, it's not about always me teaching because we learn so much from each other. I learn from members. So it's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Awesome. I wanted to talk about budgeting in this episode because really it's the foundation to be able to start creating wealth. Right? If you don't have your budget in order, you don't have extra cash flow to invest, then, you're never going to get anywhere. Right. So, one of the reasons that this podcast was born out of was doing a lot of research on the current state of our Latino community in building wealth, particularly being able to use one of the easiest tools out there to create wealth, which is the stock and bond market, right? Capital markets. Only 5% of 62 million Latinos are using the stock market, which is crazy. I think there is a lot to that, many reasons for that. But one of them is because we don't have any extra cash flow. We're just not good at budgeting. So we don't have any good budgets. And how do we invest? But also, I think having interviewed a number of Latinos, having talked to a lot of Latinos, being a Latino, there's a lot of distrust from coming from a third world country. We don't really trust financial institutions. And so that distrust really follows us here to the United States. And so I always ask my guests, Jen, do you use the stock market at all? And if you do, what's been your experience?
Yeah. So basically, with our investments, my husband's military, so we do the TSP. I have a brokerage account as well. One thing we've tapped into financial professionals because I am a financial counselor, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see me teaching you about the stock market. I leave that to other people. And so even though I'm knowledgeable enough, there's still things I don't know. So I definitely tap into the professionals. So really, we just make sure that we max out everything that we can. But we also know, and here's the other thing is that I think a part of with Latinos, one, yes, there's the cash flow. We are also known to be the biggest spenders. So if we are the biggest spenders, and I don't remember the exact stat on this, there is room to invest. There's potentially room to invest. And everybody's situation is different. We also just don't don't understand. Like I said, there's this trust and information is presented in a way that we don't understand. And maybe it's presented from someone that really doesn't connect. So it's awesome seeing people like Eunice or that are out there serving our community because they need that. They're going to be more apt to trust someone that looks like them, that really understand their culture, their background, being an immigrant, whatnot. So I think that's really, really important. And I hope I answered your question because again, I went in different directions.
Oh, you did, Jen. You did. And the reason I asked that question is because I want Latinos and Latinas to hear it from other Latinos and Latinas. The stock market is something that can be trusted. It doesn't have to be difficult. It is one of the easiest ways to actually start having employees work for you, right? Anytime you buy a share of a company, you're basically buying, employees for you. So love that. Thank you for sharing that. Jen, you are in this space. You know a lot of people, a lot of Latinos and Latinas in the financial education space. What would you tell the audience? What is the best way to find someone to help them for their issue? What are the things you would look for if you were sitting there looking for someone to help you?
Well, first look at what you're needing. What really identify what is it that you're needing and what is the biggest priority. Maybe you have a ton of needs right now, right? And they're in different directions. But what is your biggest priority? And then from there, knowing your biggest priority and what your goals are, like your biggest goal right now or your biggest goal right now, then you can identify people to work with. And there is definitely a lot of people. There's a lot of Latinos in the financial space. And it really excites me because when I started this, not that there weren't any. I'm sure there were, but they weren't visible. I didn't see them. And I didn't start to see Latinos in the financial space till about the pandemic, right? And that's just 2 years ago. That's when things, or even 2019, I think I started to see more. So there's in the financial space, you will see Latinos like yourself and myself. We did some education and you did a lot of studying. I applaud you for that, for the CFP. So maybe that person took an extra step to educate themselves. So there's financial planners, there's financial counselors, there's financial coaches. One thing about financial coaching, it is not an industry that is monitored. Maybe that's not the right word.
Regulated.
Regulated. Like financial advisors, like I'm not regulated like a financial advisor, but I do have to uphold certain ethics and standards.
Yeah.
Which is why I wanted to do that. Not that I don't trust myself. I do, but I wanted to make sure that I wanted to not just have the education, but I wanted to have something to show the clients that they can trust me. I'm not just talking out of just whatever. There are bloggers, there are financial educators, again, that maybe it's not regulated. And so there's value in all of them, right? And I'm not going to say just because you and I have the fancy letters, we're the only people you should trust. There's bloggers and podcasts that they bring life experience and there's value. But again, you have to know what you need and make sure that they can provide that, make sure that they have the experience and that they have accomplished what you are wanting to accomplish.
Yes, that last piece is super important. I would say even accomplish more than what you want to accomplish.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they're gonna uplift you. They're gonna get you to the next level that much quicker because they're already thinking 2, 3 levels ahead of you, which is great. Jen, how do people find you? If people want to work with Jen, want to read her book, what's the best way to people to engage with you?
Just my website, jenhemphill.com, or just on my podcast, Her Dinero Matters.
Love it, Jen. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience today?
I don't think so. I think just one of the things that I also notice in our community is that we can get overwhelmed, or we think that maybe investing for retirement is not for us. It's far-fetched because of not understanding, and or maybe we think that we don't have enough money to invest, or just I'm a big fan of always starting where you're at with what you have. It doesn't matter because you can start investing. You don't have to have hundreds and thousands of dollars to start investing. I really encourage you to do that now, because I know, Nestor, you know about compounding interest. It's magical and it's beautiful. And really starting today, even if it's just a little bit, it's going to go a long way. You're going to see 10, 20 years from you now, the fruit of your labor, if you will. And so I just really encourage you, if you're not investing, if you're not putting away much in savings, just start. Start where you're at with what you have.
Thank you, Jen. That is awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nestor. I've really enjoyed this.
Bueno, pues, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I want to go ahead and ask you to please send me any questions you may have or any topics you want me to talk about. Go ahead and send them to Nestor, Nestor, at greencardstogreenbacks.com. I actually read every email you send, so I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to head over to greencardstogreenbacks.com for the show notes for this episode and really links to any resources we may have discussed. Bueno, amigos y amigas, nos vemos pronto. Let's go make those greenbacks.